Welcome back to Canadian Justice, where we're talking with Jen Shayko, a franchise lawyer and expert in the franchising business model. In the last segment, we were talking about the advantages of a business becoming a franchise, why someone might want to franchise their business. But what about the other side of that business model, Jen? If you want to start your own business, if you want to become an entrepreneur, why would buying a franchise be a good option?
So, franchising is very attractive for small business owners because it gives them the chance to operate something that has a proven system. And typically, there will be some goodwill that has been built up in that specific brand or trademark or trade name. So, even though they have their own business, they're getting into a larger network and they're getting the benefits of that experience from that larger network that's more established.
And what does it take? What do you think it takes to become a successful franchisee? If you want to succeed in this, do you have any tips for people who want to get into this?
Yeah, it's very similar to owning your own business in the sense that it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of determination, and it takes a lot of grit. But what's different about getting a franchise business is you need to follow the system as a franchisee. So you get the benefit of a system. And on the other side of that is that you need to follow it. So to ensure the consistency of that business.
Yeah, so that we talked about that a little bit in the last segment about, the definition you gave of what is a franchise. But, I understand there are obligations on both sides. There are obligations by the franchisor to the local entrepreneur, and then that local entrepreneur has their own obligations. So, can you give me some examples of typical obligations that a franchise owner, the local operated business, might have to the larger corporation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the local owner will have to undergo vigorous training so that they can learn how to execute the franchised system and the business of that system. So the training will typically be on the method of operation. And following that training period, it's really for that local owner to adhere to the brand standards that will be enforced by the franchisor. So when you go into one location in Toronto versus another location in Yellowknife, you would expect the same coffee or the same type of service. So it's really that hallmark of consistency that both sides are trying to get at.
And what about on the other side? What obligations does the large corporation, the franchisor, have to the local businesses?
So franchisors need to stay competitive in a rapidly evolving marketplace. And so it's the franchisor's duty to modernize and innovate and kind of make sure that they're keeping with the pulse of that particular industry and then to roll out whatever changes or updates across the system. It's also the franchisor's duty to enforce the standards because that's how you get consistency. So franchisors are very active in trying to enforce those system standards or brand standards across their network.
So, when we talk about obligations that one side has to another, one of my big questions is what happens when there's a disagreement? What are some typical disputes that you see as a franchise lawyer? What are the main legal issues that come up in this business model that require sometimes even litigation?
Yes, so disputes are inevitable, especially between two different business partners. And there's lots of different litigation that does come up in the franchising context. But there is quite a bit of disagreement that can come up when there's ever a system change. So it's very hard for anyone to accept change. And you may know, like, you like doing something a certain way, or you might like selling a certain product. So, where the franchisor is actually trying to, modernize, update, keep the system fresh, the rollout of those system changes may be very difficult on some franchisees or the network. Or let's say if you're changing your staffing model, if you're going from, a partial operating hours to 24 hours of operation, those kind of system changes can be very difficult to implement, both on the franchisor side, and then the acceptance of those changes by the franchisee can also be very difficult.
Wow, so it's super interesting. I imagine with so many businesses that use this model, the sort of possibility of types of disputes is endless, but luckily there are great lawyers like you to help in those situations. We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.